Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Links Foundation Incorporated's 2020 Virtual Legislative Summit. At this time, it is my honor to welcome a woman who is fearlessly leading the Links Incorporated on a journey to impact change and transform communities, both locally and globally. Our national president is boldly leading the membership to reach new and greater heights, leaving an even greater impact on those who need us most. Ladies and gentlemen, our national president, Dr. Kimberly Jeffries Leonard.
Foundation Incorporated's 2020 Virtual Legislative Summit, transforming communities through our voice, our vote, and our power. I am Kimberly Jeffries Leonard, National President of the Links Incorporated. It is a pleasure to be surrounded by the best political and forward-thinking minds of our time. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. You may have noticed, like so many events this year, because of our global COVID-19 pandemic, we have had to pivot and use the power of technology to stay connected and engaged. Please know that the change from in-person to a virtual space does not lessen the importance or impact of this gathering. While we are saddened not to be able to meet with you in person in Washington, D.C., this is not the time to take a year off. The ability to share our advocacy agenda, as well as fight for the future of our democracy, demands our gathering today. We have been working diligently, albeit remotely, to bring you an insightful and informative program this afternoon aimed at empowering each other and ensuring that we have a voice at the table. Since its inception in 2016, our legislative luncheon, today our legislative summit, has been a moment to put forth our advocacy agenda, which addresses civil and social justice, public health, economic sustainability, diversity and inclusion, reasonable gun reform, and human trafficking issues that hinder the progress of African American people and people of African descent. Together, we impact the global Black community with purpose, commitment, and results to create sustained positive change. This is also a moment to engage in a deliberative discussion about issues that are important to us and our communities. There are three things we know. First, we are living in a politically complicated time. Second, our democracy is currently under attack. And third, we can accomplish great things when we use our voice, our vote, our power. As members of the Links Incorporated and gatekeepers of our community, we can no longer allow the power of our voices to be silenced by tactics and individuals who are afraid of a fair fight. No one joining us today can. As we prepare for one of the most important and historic elections of our lifetime, it is not only imperative, but it is our right to have unfettered access to the purest form of democracy, voting. This is the course of action that is integral in transforming communities. And we possess the power to alter the electoral landscape and to change the course of history. We've done it before, and we can do it again. In March,
when I was growing up in rural Alabama, I would ask my mother, my father, my grandparents, my great-grandparents about the signs that I saw. Saying white waiting, colored waiting. White men, colored men. White women, colored women. They would say, boy, that's the way it is. Don't get in trouble. Don't get in the way. But one day I heard of Rosa Parks. One day I heard of Martin Luther King Jr. And I met Rosa Parks when I was 17. The next year at the age of 18, I met Martin Luther King Jr. Got in the way. I got in trouble. What I call good trouble, necessary trouble. And as women of color, you must continue to get in trouble and redeem the soul of America for generations yet unborn. And I know the role that Black women have played in the past, and I know the role that you must play in the days to come. But some of our people gave their very lives. They died for the right to vote. So those of us that live today and will be living during the next few days and weeks and months, we got to go out and vote like we never, ever voted before. There's power in the vote, and we must use it as a mighty instrument, as a mighty tool. We got to save our country. We got to save democracy and save this little piece of real estate for generation yet unborn. There are forces in America trying to take us back to another time and another place, but we must stay together. We've come too far, we made too much progress, and we're not going back, we are going forward.
In March 2019, John Lewis recognized the Links Incorporated as a distinguished organization of outstanding community service and influence. When I was with him in his office, he remarked, "Our organization's commitment to integrity, courage, and accountability is essential to the bending of the moral arc of the universe towards racial justice." His words and acknowledgement of the work we do in the community at large will be forever with us. But really, all we know that it was John Lewis who was the personification of this statement. From his humble beginnings as the son of a sharecropper to his service as a US congressman known as the conscience of the Congress, Representative John Lewis lived his life demanding change and equality. Before his death in July, he said, "I have been in some kind of fight for freedom, equality, basic human rights for nearly my entire life." Even in his final act of advocacy for racial justice and voting equality, which came in the form of a letter published in the New York Times on the day his body was laid to rest, John Lewis wrote, "Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. Voting and participating in the democratic process are key. The vote is the most powerful nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. You can lose it." Despite more than 40 arrests, vicious attacks, and life-threatening injuries, Congressman Lewis remained dedicated to the philosophy of nonviolence, and we would be remiss if we did not take a moment to acknowledge his contributions.
We are excited to engage in a dialogue
John
focused on policing, criminal justice reform, and economic stability with women leaders who are not only in Congress, but are members of the Links Incorporated. Moderating the dialogue is Michelle Miller. She is an Emmy, DuPont Columbia, and Edward R. Murrow award-winning journalist, as well as the co-host of CBS This Morning, Saturday. Michelle is a member of the Greater New York chapter. Joining her for the Links in Congress panel discussion are Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, Democrat, Texas, 30th District, Dallas, Texas chapter. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, Democrat, Texas, 18th District, Houston, Texas chapter. Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, Democrat, Florida, 24th District, alumna, Southern area. Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, Democrat, Ohio, 3rd District, Columbus, Ohio chapter. And Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, Democrat, Massachusetts, 7th District, Boston, Massachusetts chapter.
President, was there anything else you'd like to say? I know you were cut off there, but before I launch into this fabulous panel, I wanted to give you the option to bring it full circle.
Michelle, I just want to say that we were so proud to have John Lewis with us. And the panel that you are getting ready to moderate of our Link Sisters in Congress is really a reflection of what he has asked us to do. It is truly our legacy. So please start with your illustrious panel.
All righty then, and he certainly was. Such a pleasure to have been able to address and lift up his life professionally. Wonderful to be with all of you here today. And good afternoon, everybody, all my lovely Link sisters and everyone who is a part of this discussion. I want you to know, I would have loved to have seen you all face to face. Of course, can't do it right now. Computer screens are the norm. But the Links Incorporated has planned both an engaging conversation. We're going to get into it. And with that, let's do just that. I'm going to start with you, Congresswoman Frederica Wilson. If you could, I know you are a member of the Education Workforce Committee, and you're so passionate when it comes to issues on education, certainly historically Black colleges and universities. You've specifically been interested on issues related to young men and boys. So what are your key priorities right now in Congress?
Oh, first of all, let me say hello to everyone, especially our national president, Madam Kimberly. I'm so proud of her and so proud to be a member of the Links Incorporated. Thank you so much for that question. I have worked my entire career on ensuring that every child has access to a quality education and a chance at a good life. I was a school principal, a better principal of the year. And I always wanted them to succeed. And for HBCUs, that's the way. And I'm so proud that our vice presidential candidate is a graduate of an HBCU. I'm a graduate of HBCU, and in the new platform, children who come from a family making $125,000 or less will be able to attend an HBCU free, no fees at all. So it is imperative that we make sure that our children are doing just right. And now my biggest priority right now is ensuring that the Commission on the Social Status of Black Men and Boys that I created, that's sitting in the Judiciary Committee that will be set up in the Department of Justice to make sure that young boys, our brothers, our fathers, and family members will reverse the 400 years of suffering. The other priority right now is working on getting in place an elected government that reflects the best we are as a nation, and one that will partner with us to implement policies that help our communities grow and become stronger. I've been an elected official for a long time and I've learned many lessons, but the lesson that is one of the most important, that you can't govern if you can't win. We can talk about priorities and what we want to do, and all that sounds great, but if we don't win, that is all just talk.
Right now, HBCUs are seeing banner enrollment, certainly many of them. I was at Howard University just at the beginning of this week. I spoke with Dr. Wayne Frederick. A lot of people are donating, so they're seeing record numbers of enrollment. That's wonderful. And when we look at how the impact of numbers going into higher education in terms of our Black men, that's great. But there's some systemic restructuring issues that need to be accounted for here. And what's really being done at that root level, both the compound psychological, to compound those, or at least to break up the compounding psychological and social disparities facing Black men and boys?
Well, there's a lot. It's a mouthful. When I was growing up, my father told us haunting stories that were passed on to him. My great great granduncle was skinned alive, and his testicles were removed by the Ku Klux Klan and were displayed in the local market as a conversation piece for the town simply because he was a Black man. And white men were intimidated by the manhood of the newly arrived Africans. That stigma exists today, and the tension that is experienced between Black men and the police. It is raw and it is real and is manifested through rage and hate. Well, when I was the principal of Skyway Elementary, an integrated school that was nicknamed the Little United Nations because the students represented all the different races and ethnicities that we have in Miami. But that little Black boy stuck out like a sore thumb. They were very hard to manage. Their lives seemed to be filled with struggle, and they were so angry and combative. They didn't know why they felt that way. So I began to do home visits and discovered that many of the boys had no father, no uncle, not even a grandpa to give them hope. That was the beginning of my curiosity and my desire to bring about change for them. So I quit my job as a school principal, a principal of the year, and I ran for the school board and have been searching for the last 30 years for solutions to ease their pain.
What are those, Congresswoman? What quickly, just two of the solutions that you are putting in place that we can see the rewards being reaped?
Well, we're going to make sure that our elementary schools have Black male teachers. We're going to make sure that we address police violence. There will be no more chokeholds. There will be no more Black boys that we have to bury. We're going to make sure that we look at the sentencing guidelines, and we're going to make sure that our Black boys are not the biggest threat to all of us everyone is afraid of Black people. And we want to make sure that all of that goes away. So this commission is a commission that was written for the Congressional Black Caucus. And the Congressional Black Caucus will be members of this commission, and they will put forth legislation to solve the problems that we see manifested in the treatment of our Black boys and men across this nation.
Congresswoman Wilson, thank you so much. I want to move from education to economics now. And Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, as a member of the prestigious Financial Services Committee and the chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Subcommittee, I'm sure you can appreciate, especially in this time, the opportunities we have before us related to D&I work. We have them at my company. You're seeing the elevation, I should say, of the relevance that these sectors are playing within their various institutions. What are the priorities of your committee, and what do you intend to achieve during this Congress? Congresswoman Beatty?
First of all, let me just say thank you so much, and it's still morning. Good morning to my Link sisters and to you, Madam President, Kimberly Jeffries Leonard. Thank you for your vision and your wisdom, and to the entire executive committee who's on this call and national officers. It gives me great joy to participate in this legislative summit today and to serve as the first ever chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Subcommittee is not only a great honor, but it makes me understand that our vote, our voice is our power, and we are using it there. To answer your question, we want to put more people who look like us on this call in the C-suites. We want to make sure that I can count those executives who serve in Fortune 500 or 300 or 1,000 companies that I don't have enough fingers to count them. We know all too well what those numbers are now, but it's to make a difference. And I've tried to do that through legislation. I'm honored to say that I have written over 90 pieces of legislation and co-sponsored 600 bills. But the thing I'm most proud of We started this legislative conference, appropriately so, Madam President, honoring John Lewis. So when I think of the legislation we have here on telling us that we get justice through voting if we speak truth to power, to think about our jobs and justice bill that we have before the United States Congress now, led by the Congressional Black Caucus, with more than 200 bills in that piece of legislation. And I have 12 bills in one of the most powerful pieces of legislation that we will push. And they're all about improving the economy. They're all about how we can make a difference. But let me just say this to you. We have to stop selling ourselves short. We have to stop saying that we will settle for minority contracts that deal with minority, because majority people think that's less than. So we have to start talking about business diversity. We have to demand, when we're looking at asset management, when we're looking at brokering deals at the highest level, that these companies and corporations and organizations have to make sure that we have people who look like us in the room. Now, here's the thing. When we talk about this, if we're not in the interview pool, then we can never get selected. So there was something called the Rooney Rule that Mr. Rooney did with the NFL football players. And that got Tony Dungy to be a manager. They had made millions and millions and millions of dollars off of brothers playing football, but none of them could own the team. None of them could be the manager until Mr. Rooney came up with that. Well, you know, I'm a link, so we dare to be different. So I introduced something called the Beatty Rule. And I am telling you, it passed. And not only that, with the Federal Reserve Bank, for the first time, we have an African-American who is the president in Atlanta, Georgia, of their Federal Reserve Bank. Now, we only have one, but that's where you come in. That's where, as strong sisters, we have to continue to fight to put more of us on corporate boards, to work with the powerful ELC, and we have a partnership there, and that is so powerful. But I can tell you, the number one thing is for us to challenge the majority. Also, we must put ourselves in a position that we become fearless, like the sisters on this call today, my sisters in Congress, my sisters who stand up for the economy, who stand up for education and criminal justice, and who know that we are in a 3 pandemic right now. Surely COVID-19 health pandemic, but we are in an economic pandemic and a social justice. So we are here to speak truth to power, because Black lives matter. And if you don't believe that being the chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Subcommittee on Finance is not making a difference, then I ask everybody who's watching this today, go check out our hearing on Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook and see what happens when one of the most powerful individuals can come before our Congress with Black women. The powerful Congresswoman Maxine Waters, chairwoman of the Financial Services Committee, our very own Eddie Bernice Johnson, Link sister, chair of the Science and Technology. So when you talk about diversity and you talk about making a difference, having a young bad sister, Ayanna Pressley, come and speak truth to power before the nation, to stand up in Washington, D.C. and tell them, deny us the opportunity to put Harriet Tubman on a $20 bill, and we will tell you that we're going to fight to the end. And all of that embraces why we fight for diversity and inclusion. It is not as much about the diversity as it is about the inclusion. And I just want to thank you so much for allowing me to bring those brief remarks. At the same time, we are holding our Congressional Black Caucus meeting.
You hit on so many topics. I want to ask you about one, what is the status of Harriet Tubman on the $10 bill? Quickly.
Well, I'll tell you, if it was left up to my sister, Ayanna Pressley, and I, we would tell you we'll have an answer tomorrow. But we are still fighting for it. And we are very hopeful come January 2021 that you will definitely see 3 bad sisters standing there. a vice president of these United States who happens to be an honorary link, and 2 link sisters. And I know we will be flanked by every link in this nation as we make that history.
How about that? So speak on the point of speaking truth to power. In business and in corporate America, certainly the only time we've seen real change with respect to our numbers and diversity is when you tie those numbers to incentives like the bottom line, pay,
Absolutely.
and bonuses. How do you insert, as a congresswoman, that pressure into the private sector? Can you?
So let me say one thing that we have the opportunity to do. As a subcommittee chairperson on that committee, I have subpoena power. Can you imagine, as we heard from Frederica Wilson, when she talked about growing up and what her father said, can you imagine what my mother would be thinking if she were alive today, that I sat in the United States Capitol and had 9 of the most powerful people in Bank America to come before me and testify? Fast forward to today. Last week, the New York Federal Reserve hired Loop Capital, a Black man and a Black woman, Jim Reynolds and Sandy Reynolds, now have received that portfolio. I can tell you 2 days ago, JP Morgan Chase made the Sandra Duckett, a Black woman, a president of their operations. Now, interestingly enough, those individuals came before our committee and we challenged them. I'm proud to say that I have a lot of assistance, backup, shared sisterhood, because Ayanna Pressley also serves on the Financial Services Committee. But we're not playing with them. And what we're holding them accountable to, regulations, making the change. This is a real committee written into law through Section 342 of the Dodd-Frank Act with the Office of Minority Women and Inclusion. We're going to make history with this, and we're going to move the needle. It will not happen overnight, but we know we have systemic racism, and there has to be a culture change. And that's why I've also introduced racism as a national crisis. So we are serious, and we are making a difference that we will see more people who look like us, more women, more minorities, our LGBTQ community, all included as we make change for the future, because that is our power.
And not just look like us, but who have a mindset, I guess, to help in that effort. Because I know with Tashonda Duckett over at Chase Consumer Banking, she has extended that in a program and given it its full effort to ensure that you seed the next generation. So with her Pathways initiative. So
absolutely. We have people like John Rogers, who now has made Melanie Hobson a co-partner and owner with Ariel Management. Now we see members going on large corporate boards, making hundreds of thousands of dollars. But what's more importantly, other Black girls can see women like us, women in the Links Incorporated, women on this call, so they too believe that they will have a future that will be more than what the past has provided for us. And so we are moving the needle. We're making changes because we're no longer afraid. We're entering the room. You know, it's just like Shirley Chisholm said, the first Black woman in Congress. She said, I'm unbought and unbossed.
How about that? How about that? I'm remiss to ask you about Social Security, but I need to move on. Madam President, may I go? Are we going to be able to go a bit longer? I know Social Security viability is key to a number of us. What can you tell us in reference to ensuring that that is still a mainstay of our future?
Let me just briefly say that is such an amazing question, because we know that my colleagues on the other side are trying to deplete Social Security by 2035 and saying it will be depleted. We know that many members have tried to privatize it. But let me tell you the hope that I can give you. 209 members of Congress signed on to a piece of legislation that allows us to continue to fund Social Security to 2100. And so that gives us hope that we are not going to let them privatize Social Security. We're not going to take away the rights of Social Security. So every day we are fighting to make changes in how much is taxed on the income that you make. And we are fighting very hard. But I know you have heard that people are trying to say that after 2035, which really is not that far away, that Social Security will be depleted. That will not be the case. HR 2100 will prevail.
Yeah, it's so important to so many of us who paid into it for so long. Thank you, Congresswoman. I'm going to move on now to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who has just joined us on the call. And I know, first, welcome, and secondly, we experienced the intersection of this incredible pandemic at a time when we've seen so much social unrest. We think back on history and what we've learned in moments of times like this. You've been very outspoken. You know, you speak truth to power, Congresswoman, and you've been speaking out about reparations. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on reparations in this time, its acceptance or denial, and whether we can expect to see more debate on this issue in Congress moving forward, regardless of who wins the election.
Well, there's a little bit of humor, which I know will fall on some ears with a smile. Let me take you for a half a day to talk about the seriousness of reparations, but I won't take a half a day. First, I will acknowledge Madam President, and of course my colleagues, my Link sisters, who I have the greatest respect for all over the nation, and then in particular the pride that I have in the Link sisters here in the United States Congress. We work together in many overlapping areas and seem to have the same kindred spirit. Thank you for allowing me to come on in the aftermath of the introduction of the jobs and justice legislation that has just been introduced, a multi-pronged initiative by the Congressional Black Caucus that covers everything from Social Security to making sure that justice is not denied to any of us. In the backdrop of our loss of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I speak to her iconic legal work, as well as the impact that she had in the court of at least ensuring that the voiceless might have a voice. We are now facing a tumultuous time in America. Short of the changing of administrations, we, from the perspective of the Judiciary Committee, are seeing a very skewed understanding of the Constitution and a reckless running of the tools of justice, including the U.S. Department of Justice, the Attorney General, which in fact have no consciousness of their stated role, precedent role, that has to do with the question of representing the American people. That means you're fending for yourself. That's why the legislative body will now become stronger, or has to become stronger. And what does that mean? If we would put in context what HR 40, the commission to study reparations and develop proposals, if we could get a sense of the seriousness of bondage and the holding of the descendants of Africans and descendants, because over a 200-year period, obviously some of these people were people who descended from the original slaves that came in 1619. And if we would walk in the shoes of the brutality and the inhumanity of what happened, if we would not look at ourselves in 21st century America, but begin to understand what those who cannot speak for themselves, some of the impact of us today, science will tell you, sociologists will tell you, psychologists will tell you that DNA of families being separated, pulled apart, women brutalized, women raped, men hung, treated like boys over centuries, pierces now today in the consistent inequities. Yes, we have wealthy people, but we don't have wealth. And the United States has never addressed the government sanctioning of slavery. I wish I could get America to understand. I asked the Links to get their policy people to work with me, because I'd like the Links can support policy, and that's what it is. And so this crusade that I have is building upon the only group because they tried to enslave Indians, the indigenous people, who also should be addressed, but they have over a series of other initiatives or legislative responses. But no one has ever responded to bondage. No one has ever provided any recognition or compensation. Where there was never any life insurance, there's never any workman's comp, there was any days off, there was never any sick days, vacation, etc. And when President Lincoln tried to provide an economic response, which people seem to think is humorous, he was saying 40 acres, that was land and money. And he was saying, give us a transportation mode at that time, or a workhorse at that time, as a mule. And that got totally obliterated with the election of his death and the election of Andrew Johnson. Sounds like what we're doing today after President Obama and the election of this individual at this time. But the point is that then through that period of time, even though there was a little bright light of governors and Congress people, it was imploded. In the 1800s, we were expendable. They didn't care. They wanted to keep the Southern Compromise. And then we continued to be hung, 4,000 of us. And then we continued to have disrespect and disregard all through the 20th century. We never gained anything in the 20th century. We gained toward the end with the great leadership of the foot soldiers and Dr. King and beloved John Robert Lewis, 64 Civil Rights Act, the 65 Civil Rights Act. But you can see that now we're in 2020, we're still fighting for voter suppression because the government has never taken a systemic look at systemic racism and institutional racism. We have to hold their feet to the fire. And this is the only sort of broad base, all that people have been discussing. The legislative input of the wealth question is really at the top of the list of 40, HR 40, is that we never got wealth to transfer. So we have these pockets. And when you look at the numbers are not dumbed down because of wealthy people in our community. They're not dumbed down because of athletes, private equity, lawyers, doctors, etc. We still have high numbers in at-risk, lack of education, COVID-19. So that means prone to all kinds of things that are coming. Another pandemic is going to come. We have it in crime, inequities in treatment in the justice system. So this is what HR 40 means. It means that the government takes a pause and recognizes 200 years plus of bondage, the wealth that was created by those slaves. We actually made cotton king. That's where the term came from. And we provided, in making cotton king, the economic engine of this country. Wall Street was able to be built. The commodities market was able to be built because the cotton was such a precious export that it made us rich. We also made Europe rich. I was on the phone yesterday with parliamentarians from Europe and the European Union parliamentary discussion on racial justice. We made Europe rich. So HR 40, I hope, if not collectively, but individually, you're across the nation, you should be asking your member of Congress, Republican or Democrat, to be able to support it. We're very gratified, if I might, as I conclude, very gratified for the breadth of support over close to 160 members of Congress. It was meticulous. By the way, let me pay tribute to John Conyers, the dean, the individual who introduced this in 1989. And he gave me and wanted me to carry it forward. And I have worked partly to recognize him being the dean and how long he worked, and no one responded to where we are today, which is that our constant supporter, Danny Glover, who has been there, in COBRA organizations, NARC, the National Association Commission on Reparations, John Legend. We just got the endorsement of all the players in the NFL. We have individual players, John Legend, the mayor of Los Angeles, Mayor Garcetti, the U.S. Conference of Mayors gave us a resounding, this is not the U.S. Black Conference of Mayors, the U.S. Conference of Mayors. That means your mayor, wherever you are, has endorsed HR 40. What are we doing to move this forward in the United States Congress, to get it to the floor and to get it ready to be signed? It is a commission that can be, some of you can be appointees, because it is the appointees are by the leadership of the House and Senate, and then the president has an opportunity to appoint scholars who can legitimately look at how we craft a response. I see Dr. Glover here. My president in another capacity, and I thank her for her leadership, but she should never have to worry about her historically Black college. They should never have to worry about their doors closing, never have to worry about their funding. because the government sanctioned slavery and it sanctioned our status. We were not a single person in the United States Congress. By the way, please do your census, anybody who has not done their census. So I come to you with the attitude of piercing how should I say it, the sense of lack of reality that HR 40 is. It is very real. If you do your history, it is very real. And so to your neighbor, I'm not going to ask your neighbor in Chicago for a check. I'm letting the government has to craft the response as they look at Tulsa and 300 dead and took our wealth there, as they look at what they did with the syphilis experiment in Tuskegee and all the other experiment, Rosewood. That is what we're talking about with HR 40. And I pray that our nation, with the underpinnings of the strength and the leadership of African Americans, I'm praying that as we go forward and our leadership, and by the way, just let me just say very quickly, Senator Schumer supports it, Speaker Pelosi supports it, all of our leadership supports it, our chairman, Jerry Nadler of the Judiciary Committee, and many others. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak seriously from my heart to yours. Thank you.
Congresswoman, we really appreciate that. Certainly folks support it in principle, but the big question mark, and we could go on another 20 minutes, but I can't throw it out there for this, is how do we pay for it? Because there is a cost. And as we loom throughout paying for COVID-19 and a number of other crises we now face, like we have to be armed with the direction on like how we argue that case. But I have to go to Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley because we've got to talk about the election. We must talk about we've got to move on to Congresswoman Pressley.
I appreciate it, but don't leave that on the table, that how do we pay for it?
We'll
I know
come back
it,
if Madam President allows, I will come back to you on that.
Thank you. I want to yield to my wonderful colleague. Thank you so very much, but we can pay for it. Thank you.
Absolutely. She's been so patient. We're talking November 3rd, and this election. And how do we have safe and secure elections? I know so many people are on pins and needles because they're watching every single day. There's some new issue popping up about how a mail-in ballot won't be counted. Some voter suppression in some state is being implemented. I mean, how do we secure the election system at this stage, now that many of us will be using the U.S. Postal Service?
Sure. Okay. Well, I want to get to that, but, I was raised right. So that means I have to, honor my protocol here. So first, I just want to affirm that indeed, Black lives do matter and Black journalism matters. And so I just want to hold space for you, Michelle, and thank you and all our Black journalists for the role that you play in the movement and telling our stories, for elevating consciousness. And I just wanted to salute you for that. And then I want to say what a joy and an honor it is that I already know what it is to call a Black woman Madam President, because we get to do that with President Jeffries, and I proudly represent the Boston chapter, so I get to do that with our president, Christy Agoon. So I want to acknowledge my chapter. And then I want to say, indeed, Black lives matter and Black representation matters. And as someone who is an only child who took to movement building work early on because of my mother's activist example, I'm just so grateful for the solidarity and the sisterhood that I have, not only with my Link sisters, but with my CBC sisters. And I so appreciate that this has been couched in legislation, because please do understand that the disproportionate hate, hurt, and harm that Black Americans have experienced since the original sin of slavery, that hate, hurt, and harm was not naturally occurring. It was legislated, it was precise, it was codified through lawmaking. And so we must be equally as precise and prescriptive, and we can and must legislate equity and healing and justice. And so good morning to everyone. Thank you for the acknowledgement in this moment that our destinies and our freedoms are tied. That's what all these issues really underscore. None of them happen in silos. They are intersectional. And I want to bring Coretta Scott King into the space because she met Martin in Boston at 12th Baptist Church. She went to attended the New England Conservatory, and she doesn't get enough oxygen. And she said that punishing a mother and her family is violence. Discrimination against a working man is violence. Ghetto housing is violence. Ignoring medical need is violence. Contempt for poverty is violence. So when we talk about reparations, economic stability, diversity and inclusion, criminal justice reform, policing, the barriers to employment and economic security are also barriers to representation and freedom. So I just want to say we have many fights ahead. Our struggles and our successes are linked. But as hundreds of thousands have taken to the streets, I remain hopeful and committed to winning this fight with all of you. Now, what can we do? We talk a lot about, Black women being the most reliably voting constituency. I want to also hold space for the fact that we are also the most reliably and consistently leading. We are the architects of movements. We have been the truth tellers. We have been the preservers of democracy. And that's why we have been on the front lines of these fights right now to ensure that our elections are safe and secure come November. So, and that goes all the way back, that legacy that we're honoring is from Diane Nash to Fannie Lou Hamer to Septima Clark and countless others who were instrumental in securing the right to vote. Some people saw the film Selma, and that was the first time they realized that our sisters had played a role as foot soldiers and as architects of this movement as well. So we must continue to protect the right to vote. We have to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to stop voter suppression from disenfranchising our people. We need to regain control, Democratic majority of the Senate, because that bill, for all the disingenuous, contradictory comments made by our colleagues across the aisle who would dare celebrate John Lewis and all of his contributions and his example of patriotism, they will not bring the Voting Rights Act to the floor for a vote. So they need to rename it the John Lewis Voting Act, and it needs to come to the floor for a vote to stop voter suppression from disenfranchising our people. We have to pass the HEROES Act, also sitting on the desk of Mitch McConnell, which provides critical funding for the United States Postal Service, as well as for election security for our states. We know that foreign interference is real. We need the investment in the hardening of our infrastructure, and that takes resourcing. And that resourcing has been allocated in the HEROES Act. And it's really more important than ever before that we all make a plan to vote in the election. So whether you'll be voting by mail or voting early in person, like I am, make a plan, because the right to vote is one of the most powerful tools a citizen has in a democracy, and we have to use it. And I want to say, I think the vote is two things. It is resistance in this moment. It is a resistance of a draconian, discriminatory, cruel, callous, and corrupt administration. And it is an affirmation. Reverend Barber says that we're in the midst of a national reckoning that demands of us a third reconstruction. I am listing all of you as community builders in that reconstruction, and that means making a plan to vote. It means completing the census. And then finally, I don't want to leave our young people out of this. I have introduced a federal amendment to lower the voting age to 16 in federal elections. I know some of y'all are going to, think that that is too young, but please know that our young people, they are more adept and knowledgeable and have a policy acumen that belies those that are eligible to vote. And they are dealing with adult burdens and responsibilities and hardships. And they will inherit the country that we're shaping right now. They're leading on every existential threat to this country, from climate injustice to gun violence prevention to racial injustice. And I believe they deserve to cast a ballot.
Wow. I mean,
and I did, Michelle, I did get 125 people on the record to vote for that amendment. And that's more than have ever supported that.
Wow. You know what, that you dropped a bomb right there with that announcement. And perhaps I'm just out of the mix on that issue. My daughter, who's 14, would love to see that happen, but that's just
it's a growing movement, Michelle. It's happening. There's reform happening in city elections and state elections to lower the voting age to 16. And so now we're just proposing that on the federal level. And again, it just makes someone eligible.
Wow, that's saying a lot. I know that, well, thank you, Congresswoman Presley. I understand Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson is on the line. Have you been able to get on, Congresswoman? Are you present and accounted for?
I'm present. I'm not sure I can be seen. I'm at my desk. I'm leaving another committee.
We hear you loud and clear. Can we talk to you for a moment?
Sure.
Just briefly, if your picture we're going to try and get up, but I have to say, COVID, we're in the midst of an era now as we are now facing our 10th month or heading into the 10th month that this nation is dealing with this pandemic. I wanted to know from you how you're making sure that the necessary resources are being allocated to those high impacted areas with surges of COVID-19, where we hit a mark, 200,000 lives lost this week. And we know that so many of them, twice the number, or at least if it impacts the African American community so disproportionately, if an African American gets it, they're twice as likely to die from it. So how are you out there championing this cause?
Well, first of all, I must say that we've been fighting for the finances to address the issues that, first of all, make us so vulnerable. We have always been saddled with the worst housing, the worst available health care, the worst environment, the most high blood pressure, the most diabetes, which makes us very vulnerable to this disease. All of my career, we have tried to address these issues. I think that with this pandemic, it's bringing to the forefront the disparities that we've always suffered. We're trying very hard to get specific addressing of these issues within every bill that we can, because clearly history now has shown us to the present that we have fought without as much success as we'd like to address where we are now. We wouldn't be in this vulnerable position if it had not been for racism, if it had not been for discrimination in housing and the opportunity to have good health coverage, to have good fresh food. So all these food deserts, all the issues that we deal with on a daily basis, including the lack of mental health care, we've tried to address during this time. Just yesterday, we finally passed a bill that I've been trying to get for a couple of years, to get a 3-digit number for persons who are depressed and contemplating suicide. We've seen a rise in African-American children, especially in suicide. What I've tried to do in the committee of which I chair is to make sure there are opportunities for educational opportunities, because right now, some of the leading researchers that are coming up with a vaccine are African American. You don't see that on the film that much, but it is true. It's just like going to the moon. Some of the leading people that caused that moon challenge to be possible were African American women. And so we still are trying to gain our footing for the information we have and the fight that we must go on. What makes this election so great is that we need more people to join our team. We need more people to stand up for the things that we've been fighting for as long as I've been in office. For example, we're dealing with police relations. As long as I can remember, African-American elected officials have been dealing with that issue, but we still don't have enough votes to finally get it done. Election means that we can get enough to do that. We can change that Senate with a good turnout, and we can change the president. And for the first time in history, we might have enough numbers to get some of this meaningful legislation passed. In my Science, Space, and Technology Committee, we've been fighting very hard to get STEM studies, to get the notion of STEM education around our nation, and especially through this organization, because we know that's where the opportunities are for the future in jobs and dealing with artificial intelligence, dealing with all of the technologies that have come on the forefront. Unless we address it, we will continue to be on the back burner. Just this morning, I was reading an article where one of the major banks indicated that the reason they couldn't hire more people of color is because they couldn't find them qualified. Now, it is clear that we are behind in that area, but the legislation that I have passed, the research we're trying to do to show the disparities, we must continue and must continue with fervor. We've got to have the Senate support for much of this in order for us to be able to push through all of what we work for throughout the years. We're right on the threshold of having enough votes to get it passed into law. So that's why it's so important that every person cast their ballot against this present president and turn that Senate to a Democratic majority so that for the first time we can be successful in many of the issues that have brought us to this point.
Brilliant points, Congresswoman Johnson. And if you don't already know, the name of that doctor leading the NIH vaccine trials is Kiza-Miki Corbett, doctor. She's 34 years old. So she's our poster girl out there for STEM. She's making it happen and she's on the forefront. And COVID-19 has so many implications. I mean, 200,000 people dead. Just think about if they're registered voters, what that could mean in our election. Think about the fact that a disproportionate number of those are brown and Black people and what that could mean come November 3rd. We unfortunately have run out of time. I can't believe it. We could go on because I know we want to go back to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee to answer that very important question, but we have to say goodbye for now. Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, Sheila Jackson Lee, Frederica Wilson, Joyce Beatty, Val Demings, who was supposed to be with us but wasn't able to get to us, and absolutely Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. We so appreciate all of you for being here. And I'm now going to turn it back over to our delightful and beautiful and brilliant Madam President, Kim.
To recognize our legislative partners, we're pleased to welcome National Vice President Ethel Isaacs Williams of the West Palm Beach, Florida chapter.
Good afternoon. What a start to this legislative summit. It has been absolutely a pure joy to hear the brilliance, to hear the boldness of our sister links who are serving in Congress. And at this time, it's my great pleasure to acknowledge those who are also in the struggle with us. And I say in the struggle because the fight must continue. We have some amazing advocacy partners. Those advocacy partners are on the ground. They have long-standing connections to communities. They understand what is the real mission before us. And so we proudly join with Dove, Fair Count, NCNW, which is National Council of Negro Women, when we all vote and own our vote. Without these organizations by our side, working hand in hand, we couldn't get done the mission that is before us. We really shouldn't have to be reminded of how serious this election is, of how serious it is to be counted. Everybody breathing in your household, 1 week to go, to be counted. But it is important that if we already know, that we tell others how important it is. Thank you to our advocacy partners. We will together reach our mission. We will accomplish that which we have fought so hard and so long to do.
We are born in this world with so many doors closed already.
There's one thing for us to say what beauty looks like. There's another thing to make sure our beauty is welcome in all places, all institutions. There's a systemic, institutionalized bias and discrimination that exists against us because of our hair.
People have discriminated against me because of my hair.
Where is the justice when Black men and women are denied access to economic advancement because of their natural appearance? moments ago, we passed off of the California State Senate floor the Crown Act that says all of us who wear our hair in its natural form won't be discriminated against in school or the workplace.
I'm glad to be associated with the Crown Coalition to make it clear that racial discrimination based on natural hair and hairstyles is prohibited in New York State.
But I want to thank everyone that it took to make the progress that we have and the progress I know to come. There's so many people to thank.
We have another special treat in the form of a panel with my sisters United for Reform. Earlier this summer, at the request of Dr. Glenda Glover, who is our international president of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, she also happens to be a member of the Links Incorporated. She pulled together 13 presidents of African American women's organizations in America, and we joined forces to help leverage our voices of more than 5 million collective members to hasten universal change, particularly as it related to police reform. And we continue to advocate and demand justice overall. So today, I am so happy to have 9 of my sister presidents here with me today. Our international president of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Dr. Glenda Glover. The national president and CEO of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Beverly Evans Smith. On behalf of the international president and board chair of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, Rashida Liberty, we have the executive director of Sigma Gamma Rho, Cynthia Eubanks. The chair and president of the National Council of Negro Women, Dr. Johnetta Cole. President of the National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Dr. Virginia Harris. President of the Black Women's Agenda Incorporated, Guinevere Catchings Hess. Founder and CEO of National Cares Mentoring Movement, Susan L. Taylor. National President of Jack and Jill of America Incorporated, Kernesha McGill Brown. And last but not least, the national president of Top Ladies of Distinction Incorporated, Sharon Beard. Okay. And now we're going to bring our moderator extraordinaire, Michelle Miller, back to moderate a discussion that will cover a wealth of topics, including the importance of our voice on the Supreme Court, voter engagement, the general elections, the census, and so much more. Michelle.
That is a lot of ground to cover. It's a good thing I'm a moderator extraordinaire. Our Madam President said so, so thank you so much. This week, tumultuous. Words can't even filter the round of emotion from so many women, from so many different backgrounds. I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, our Supreme Court Justice, shocked us with her death. The notorious RBG, the girl from Brooklyn, her entire career advocating for equal treatment among men and women. And in recent years, the sole voice of conscience on the Supreme Court, so many people have said the liberal voice, and many times dissenting against the very conservative justices who sought in retrospect for those of us of a certain persuasion to halt progress in our country. So how important is it for women and the Black community to have a voice and a perspective like hers on the Supreme Court? We don't have a Black woman on the Supreme Court, not yet anyway. And certainly this election will determine whether or not we will. Dr. Glenda Glover and Susan Taylor, my very good friend, I want you to sort of address this because so much of our experiences come from, or our political persuasion, our ethos come from our own personal point of view and our life experience. So how did she impact you in her decision-making?
Well, I'll go first. Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to share in this very worthwhile and meaningful moment. Uh, what Ruth Bader Ginsburg has done as she revolutionized the thought processes of issues pertaining to American women, and the black women have also benefited from just her thought process, and that's what her stands. And so black women have always been leaders. As a lawyer myself, I can really speak to how important it is to have someone of that caliber in the Supreme Court, and how disgraceful it would be not to have the I call national due process to rush through an appointee simply because you can. So, and black women have been leaders for so long. It doesn't matter the day and age. The issues that were relevant 100 years ago are still relevant now. We're still fighting for the right to vote. The right to vote 100 years ago, but now it's the right to vote properly and to protect that right to vote, to guard against the fear and intimidation, the voter suppression. Those acts, there are some actions that are almost legal of how we can suppress that vote. That's what this fight is all about, making sure that that right to vote. Alpha Kappa Alpha has put out a call for every lawyer in the organization to come forward and join us as we try to protect this right to vote. Election day politics, before election day, the vote in the mail, when you're hearing stories about ballots being left on the street or hidden in a drawer, we're going to make sure we're there to monitor, ready to file injunctions. And when they're trying to close the polls early, you got 50 people standing in line, we're there to make sure that this doesn't happen. We're here to protect that right to vote. It's too sacred a right for it to be done carelessly. And so another issue, education. 100 years ago, equity in education was our fight. So today we're fighting for the same equal access education. As president of HBC of Tennessee State University, I understand what it means about unequal funding in education, how you have to fight for the crumbs and then argue to defend those few crumbs. And so those issues are still there. The Supreme Court is so relevant to us today in the same fights that we've had, the struggles we've had. And so that's why the sisterhood is so important. All 13 of us came together, this organization of like-minded women, Black women who led these national organizations. We came together initially to discuss and take a stand on the seriousness of the concerns of Black men and Black women and Black boys and Black girls being killed. We was talking about police brutality, but the common denomination was to come together and demand justice. There were several areas that we talked about what brought us together, and we took stands on several issues. But of those, that voting, the right to vote and the protecting that right to vote became so paramount. That's the one I decided to take on as my personal one. So yes. Thank you.
Susan, I have to throw this to you. You've been around and you have the pulse of not only young people, but I would say the pulse of this nation from a journalistic standpoint for a very long time. But the die is cast, is it not? So how do you move forward looking at a court now that is swinging to the right? You're muted, my dear. Can we take her off mute? There we go.
I think we move forward, just as Ruth Bader Ginsburg did, and Black women have throughout the centuries. I mean, we can go back to ancient Black women like Yaa Asantewaa. You know, we go back to those phenomenal warrior women in our motherland. Go back to the women who in South and Central America, throughout the Americas, throughout the Caribbean, did not stop. Think about Nanny, you know, in Jamaica, the warrior woman who just resisted the English, led her people, the Maroons, into the mountains, was never captured. No, it's been said, it's not going to happen overnight. And I think like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the sisters whose names have not been called often enough, whose names our young people don't know. The names of the women who we just heard speak and those who are represented here. It takes courage. It takes courage, tenacity, wellness, and strength to keep going. And that's what we have to do. We've always been in the vanguard of the fight for justice and equity among our people. And I think right now, with all of the tumult in the nation, we're probably closer to it with all the strengths and supports, Michelle, that we need to win. They are all in place. We have the education, we have leaders, we have the white papers and books. We've heard articulated so brilliantly those things that we need. And I think what we're talking about is seeding that next generation too. But we can't give up. Our challenge is to stay healthy so that we can think critically. We can't win this war with a limping army. We have to be strong. We have to get along. We have to have one another, not even have one another's back. We have to be one another's back, and we have to have a clear agenda. You know, I don't think there can be 40 things on our agenda. We need to know what exactly it is we're fighting for. You were talking earlier about, you know, what corporations can do. We have to become conscious consumers. We just spend our money anywhere. The only thing that the people who need to shift really understand is that bottom line. The moment we start holding back our resources and start really keeping a report card of who's on your boards, what you're standing for, what you're reinvesting in our communities, things will begin to change. So I think we're poised for success. Yes, the Supreme Court madness right now, but I always look for the divine hand, and it's always there. We have to look for it. The divine hand, things fall apart so we can put them back together better again. And that's really what's happening. And I just want to thank my sister Kim Jeffries Leonard for this convening of them. I have to jump onto another presentation, as you know, but this, I hope it's recorded because I don't want to miss a moment of this. And Michelle, I'm with you every single Saturday morning, Kefra and I, and you represent us so brilliantly. Just bless you and thank you. Thank you, my sisters. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you.
That voice, I could listen to it all day long. But you know, I hate to be the butter here, but there's so much misinformation out there, people. There is, ladies, it is coming at us from so many different sides. It is not only unhealthy, it is untrue, it is diabolical. In the realm of voter engagement, Census 2020 and racism, you know, like it's juxtaposed all sorts of minutia into this discussion. And so the key components of the United for Reform agenda and the 13 African American women organizations that have come together to establish a sort of caring arm around those three conversations. And the coalition was announced shortly following the death of George Floyd, who died while being arrested by those 4 Minneapolis police officers. And since his death, much has happened in the world, including many other countries and corporations and white allies supporting the call to acknowledge that Black Lives Matter moment. And so the question is really, you know, how do these actions help us accomplish the goal of bringing equity and inclusion into the Black community when we are being bombarded constantly with other messages? Madam President, Kim, certainly Dr. Virginia Harris and Guinevere Hess, I'd like for you to touch on these points. Madam President?
I think that the way we continue to get this out is to continue to stay on message. And as Dr. Glover and Susan Taylor said, we are so powerful because we are in numbers. We're more powerful when we're together. We're more effective when we're together. So when you bring together 13 organizations that represent over 5 million women, and we're saying the same thing and getting the message out, that is how you get these issues of importance in front of our communities. But I'm going to defer to my sister presidents, Dr. Virginia Harris and Guinevere Hess, to talk about some of the things that they're doing in their organizations around this, because our power is the fact that we're here together. Virginia.
Thank you. I'd like to just say thank you to Madam National President, Dr. Kimberly Jeffrey Leonard, for convening us all here together today. We have been talking about how the corporations can play a better role in addressing some of the institutional racism. So I'd like to just talk about some of the missteps that they've made by being silent and not addressing these issues directly within the company. And many of our corporate leaders avoid talking about race and because they feel that they would be designated as being prejudiced. But I think that it is important that they start talking about it with the employees and not putting it on the back of just the Black employees within the company, and have a complete dialogue about what's wrong within the company and how they can address some of the issues that are. The second step that I think the corporation make is happen to our African-American community. Instead of being compassionate and having more empathy, they want to know, what did this individual do to cause this kind of abuse from police officers? And then I think that overgeneralizing things sometimes help us have a better idea about how we can be more meaningful with actions, provide some framework for meaningful action within the companies. I think corporate leaders have the power, but they should be putting together platforms and statements that come from the top to let the employees know that these are things that are important to everyone within the company. Do research to fully understand events and why they're happening, and do not give the Black employees the opportunity to try to address all these things, but allow them to have the space to be angry and have some disenchantment about what's going on in the company, and seek out support from the company HR department to help them resolve some of these issues. And just do not ask the Black employees to address these issues for the company. So I think that if they would take some of these things in perspective, they can do a better job at eliminating some of the institutional racism that's going on in corporate America.
I mean, the much broader issue is that companies for such a long time have had this notion that, profits, it's like the growing profit. It's the growing, dividend for those folks who are the shareholders, and their corporate sense of community has not been really engaged in ensuring that folks are healthy and are being treated equitably. I mean, that hasn't been part of the mantra, so to speak. So how does corporate greed, sort of help to continue, Guinevere, this disparity out there that exists between brown and Black folks and whites? Guinevere, are you there?
So I can talk a little bit about some of that. I think that when we talk about, Michelle, some of this corporate greed, we've already seen the fact that a lot of corporations don't really value the fact that there are qualified candidates of African descent to be able to be even brought into the realm of their company. We know that, foot in the door, if you look at a resume, someone that may be looking at a resume from an HBCU or another college, they're not going to give us, those of us who are graduates from HBCUs, the same chance. There's this inherent bias that comes when we're talking about how corporations even look at candidates of color, promotions internally for candidates of color. So these are the things that as Dr. Harris said, we're fighting internally, we're fighting externally. One of the things that we can do to address this, I know the Links is doing this and a number of our other organizations, is ensuring that there's that level of diversity on boards. So if you have people sitting on boards that look like us, And many of our Link sisters sit on boards, but we need more women on boards. We need more women on boards. We need more women of African descent on boards. Take a look at us. We're not even the ones that you're looking at. We bring all of the things to the table that other people do. But when you have that representation, you have less of these things happening at the corporate level. And then you see that, and you talked about corporate greed. You know, we're very valuable in what we bring to the table. We're very valuable as consumers. So I think that when we are able to bring those things to the forefront and have that level of diversity at every level, then you'll be able to see then change will be made.
Black women make things happen. They make it work. Economics in the home, economics outside of the home. And certainly when it comes to our elections, it has been Black women that have been the key to getting out the vote and also educating the population on their rights. So come November 3rd, here's the big question. COVID-19 is with us. We are living with it. Black American communities are out there and under attack. That is not fiction. It's not fake news. It is fact. And so with the slowing down of the mail and people concerned about their health, they already know that the disparity exists and that if they get it, they're twice as likely to die from it in these Black and brown communities. How is your organization mobilizing your members, mobilizing the community to get the vote out by any means necessary? I'm going to throw that out to Beverly Smith, Dr. Janetta Cole, Rashida Liberty. Any one of you.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. So that sounds like a big order, doesn't it? But that is big. It is, but that is what all of us do every day. Because as Sister Leonard said, and others on the call and on the Zoom, it's critical that we do this. I think we are all very excited and enthusiastic about what we have to do. This is our chance to shine. I believe that. Thanks to the Links for the invitation to come today. And you know, I have to do a special shout out to my sorors of Delta Sigma Theta who are in the audience today. We can't do too much. And I think we know that we're in a difficult environment, and Michelle is right. We've got COVID to deal with. We've got all this virtual social distancing that we have to do, but that does not stop us in terms of where we are. We even went ahead and put out a guide to social action in a virtual world to make sure that everything we were doing, our members could still continue to do. We're acting out, and on our guide, we put things like get out the vote caravanning, going in cars, having people do drive up in terms of taking care of their census work, in terms of making sure that they're getting registered, QR code that we download to make sure they can get to the census promptly. Social media campaign, our collegians are TikToking all over the place. They have, as long as we still have that, right? They are doing what they can to make sure we are getting a social media message out. We know we look at social media a lot and that we are on there. And so what we have to do is to make sure also that the right message get there, because we also know there's people putting things on social media that are incorrect messages to try and steer us the wrong way. And what we have to do is to make sure that we know what messaging is good messaging, make sure people are aware of where they need to look and to take care of that. Poll workers, we're focusing on poll workers, getting people to sign up for the polls, monitoring the polls, being at those locations for those who are there and waiting, making sure seniors have those mobile seats that they can use, that we get some lunch out, that we do the kind of things we can to make sure they're there. We literally have a 50-day countdown that we published with the activities that we need to have happen during those next 50 days to make sure that people are there, people are active. Even though you're sitting at home, there are things that you can do. Virtual town halls. We are scheduling several parties with a purpose to make sure that we get people in line. We have something called Crimson and Cream fundraisers. We're a 501c7, so we can't say it's a Delta fundraiser, but we can do things and get people together to try and support candidates. Election protection and phone banking is critically important. The list goes on, but I want my other sisters to have the opportunity to talk about this as well. There is not too much we can't do. the biggest effort that we've got to have those, we've got to make sure we get out there and vote. We have to make sure our voices are heard. There is power in the voice of Black women. And when you take those 5 million voices and you put them together and you jam those phone lines, and when it comes to this vote on this Ruth Bader Ginsburg issue, you make sure people understand, you know, you can vote for if you want to. That doesn't mean you're going to sit in that seat next year, because we're going to vote down ballot to make sure you are not there. And that's where we have to make sure our power in terms of who we are stands out and stands up every day.
Well,
Thank
I'm
you.
not sure what else there is to say, because my national president has indicated not simply what Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated is doing, but all that you have said, my national president, is really about collaboration.
Yes.
Because each of us, privileged to be the presidents of these 13 national Black women's organizations, we are in cahoots. Sometimes I'm not sure which organization I'm speaking for. And it really does not matter, because the task in front of us, it's not trite to say. The task in front of us is about our lives. And so I like to think of this really in terms of the 3 V's. It's about our voice. A voice in a sense that we as Black women inherited. And we all know how to call that list, beginning with Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman and Ida B. Wells. We know how to come down, and we talk about the role of young Black women like Ruby Doris Smith Robinson, the secretary of SNCC. And so we know that we have a voice because we've been given a voice. But to vote is perhaps the way that we as a people can be the boldest, the most bodacious, the most outrageously powerful. But we vote because of that last V, and that is about victories. That's how we get victories. We get them, of course, in a range of ways. Dr. Martin Luther King said, you want change? We got to legislate, we got to educate where necessary, we got to agitate. But voting is in a sense to capture all of that. That is how we get our victories in health, in education, in housing. That is how we get criminal justice reform. And for those of us who suffer this double jeopardy of Black and woman, that is how we get rid of the double jeopardy. For the National Council of Negro Women, we are so on this. We are so in this. We are so engaged in this because we know, and it's been said earlier, Black women are the demographic that votes the most consistently. And the Democratic Party needs to remember, has voted the most often. But because we have that incentive, because we have that passion, doesn't mean our job is done. Our job then is to mobilize others. And I want to just take a minute, moderator extraordinaire.
Oh, you flatter me now as Madam.
Oh, Michelle, you know I'm speaking truth to your power. NCNW, and here we go with collaboration, because I know Sister President 2 times, Glenda Glover, president of AKAs and president of one of our HBCUs, is deeply involved in this as well. And that is to reach our young'uns. You know, without being morbid about this, as someone who is a seasoned citizen, it's our young people who have the most of life in front of them. And so they have the most to gain by getting up and voting. What NCNW is doing, in addition to being in collaboration with all of these sister presidents and beyond, is we have created something called Adulting 101. Now, I gotta admit, I had to be schooled about what adulting means, but I now understand that my young sisters and brothers use this term when they're referring to, I'm gonna act like an adult. So we've created Adulting 101. It is a program that we're taking to our HBCUs. It is a program we launched last week at Wilberforce and Cheyney universities. We had our incredible Angela Ray and Yellow Pain, the Dayton, Ohio rapper, saying so authentically why our young folk must vote. So let me bring all of this together by saying this. One of my sheroes, and I know I share her with countless Black women, men, and throughout all communities, Dorothy Irene Height, Sister President. Dr. Dorothy Irene Height said, Black women don't often get to do what they want to do, but they always do what they have to do. We are 13 Black women presidents committed to doing what we've got to do to vote ourselves and to encourage all others to do so.
Thank you, Dr. Cole. And we have one executive director who is on the call, Cynthia Eubanks, in for Rashida Liberty of Sigma Gamma Rho sorority. I just have to ask you quickly, what do we most need to get out the vote?
Well, first, thank you for having me. And I think it was a setup for me to have to follow. Yeah, but as Black women, you know, we're used to being set up, so we always have a comeback. So as being prepared for what we're going through right now, we need to make sure we have a plan and that we implement and follow through with our plan. As far as Sigma Gamma Rho goes, we have looked at it from the generations within our organization, within the sisterhood, and those in their common circle, making sure that they're engaged. They have all the resources to make sure that they're out there and voting and engaging on that level, whether it be from our culture pearls down to our collegiates. We have made sure that from looking at our generations, we then looked at our partnerships. Who are we collaborating with that are going to help support and reach our populations in the respective areas? And then, of course, after we've partnered with all of the Own Your Vote, When We All Vote, our partnership with Much More Than a Hashtag, then we look at the challenges in trying to get to vote. So when you look at the challenges, you look at COVID, you look at social injustice, you look at unemployment. People may not know where their next meal is coming from. So are they even thinking about going out to vote? So once you look at the strategic plan, you look at implementing the plan, then you're able to have victory at the other side. Now, it may not be the victory that we expected or we anticipated, but we all know as believers, we already won the victory, but we know that we see the challenge that's in front of us. And as long as we follow our plan, implement our plan, then we will be able to have victory on the other side, period.
Hello, short to the point. Thank you so much, Sister Eubanks. Now I'm going to throw it to Cornisha Brown and Sharon Beard, and this question to the both of you. Why is an undercount and why would it be detrimental to our communities? And what activities are your organizations doing to encourage that every person be counted? I mean, these are young folks and young folks with a purpose and a mission. So please help us understand.
I'll go first. Thank you, Michelle. You are doing just a fantastic job at moderating, especially to sit amongst 13 outstanding leaders. And thank you, Madam President Kimberly, for this opportunity. You know, in terms of Jack and Jill, we are focused on the children. It is about nurturing the future leaders. And we know that through this census, it is important that we receive the resources that we need in order for our communities to benefit in every way. When it comes to education, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to jobs, the infrastructure, it is all important. And so we must be counted. We cannot allow any of the distractions that are taking place to minimize our focus of ensuring that every person is counted. So when you're in the salons, when you're in the grocery store, wherever you are, when you say, hey, how are you doing? Have you completed your census? Because that deadline is definitely approaching by September 30th. So we are getting the word out. We are going to spend the next few days ensuring that everyone knows through our social media platform. And we are also going to have efforts within our communities to join together with partners to ensure that it's not too late, that you can be counted, and it will make a difference in everything that we do. Our children need us, our communities need us. And with this organization of members in terms of our leadership and the great numbers that we represent, we have the power to make a difference.
And Madam President, please forgive my lack of protocol there. Our newly inducted president of Jack and Jill, so proud of you. Madam President Beard. Is she on the call?
Thank you,
There she
President
is.
Jeffries, for this opportunity.
I see you.
Thank you, Michelle Miller. Yes. I would like to say that Top Ladies of Distinction Incorporated, as the parent sponsor of our youth group, Top Teens of America, we understand the power, the collective power in standing together and using our voices to be heard and to join other civic organizations in helping to support the census. And of course, Black and Brown communities have been undercounted in every census, meaning a reduction in the resources for our community. In the 2010 census, more than 800,000 African Americans were undercounted, and those missing data points mean missing dollars. Top Ladies of Distinction Incorporated and the Top Teens of America youth group have been on the ground virtually in the weeds, supporting the efforts of getting the census completed. We've held platforms and virtual meetings. We've done everything that's been stated here today because we have a large concern about how our African-American children will be impacted by us not completing the census. So undercounting African-Americans in the 2020 census could impact how federal funding is allocated to states and localities. African-American children and families are disproportionately affected by poverty and federal programs designed to alleviate the impact of poverty. So we think of education, food and nutrition, healthcare, and housing for our babies. This year is the first time the census is available online, and we have been encouraging our members as well as their family members and others to go online, complete the census, because 10 minutes can affect the next 10 years of our lives. It's just so very important that we get out and ensure that by September the 30th, that those numbers have been entered. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. All of you, amazing words, and you live up to the name, the Sisters United for Reform. Although I checked, fewer than 100 posts on Instagram. We need to get an Instagram logo. What do you call it? At Sisters United for Reform. I'm a big Instagrammer. That's got to happen immediately. You represent so many incredible organizations, and it would be a one-stop. I'm always putting each one in individually, so we got to get that done. If you want to reach the young folk, that's the way to do it. So I'm without words right now, because this alliance is really about what's going to make the change. Was really proud as a member of the Links and so many of the other organizations, and I won't name all of them, but certainly the Links Incorporated, and certainly as a Black woman, to see us come together in solidarity for advocacy on agendas that mean so much to our community. It's hard as a journalist to be involved, but as a member of so many organizations, I'm just so happy that our dynamism is in action right now. It's driving this work forward. And you are going to be change agents. Come November 4th, you will be it. So I give it back to Madam President Kimberly, and I'm just happy to have been here and to have been a part of this.
Thank you, Michelle. We appreciate you being here and taking your time to come. And thank you to my sister presidents for joining us today.
Greetings, my Link sisters. The Links Incorporated has and continues to be strong advocates for ensuring that all people, particularly Black and Brown communities, are able to exercise their right to vote. Just this year, our country has grappled with the coronavirus pandemic, racial injustice and police violence, and the loss of leading civil rights icons. We have all felt the impact that our government can have on every aspect of our lives, from our mayors and school board members to governors and members of Congress, all the way up to the president. This is why we cannot afford to leave any vote on the table. According to the Washington Post, Black women are only about 7% of the population, but tend to vote at higher rates than other groups, voting at or above 60% in the past 5 presidential cycles. They are also the Democratic Party's most loyal voters. In 2016, 94% of Black women voted for Hillary Clinton, the highest rate of any group, including Black men, and nearly double that of white women. These, my sisters, are just facts. This is a clear indication of our voting power as Black women. This is why I am so excited that we have this unprecedented opportunity to work with former First Lady Michelle Obama and her When We All Vote campaign in order to change the culture around voting and close the race and age voting gap to ensure every eligible voter is registered and ready to vote. Through this partnership, the Links will expand their Get Out the Vote efforts to increase voter registration, engagement, and turnout. All elections, but especially November's presidential one, can have lasting effects on the community, specifically our communities of color. Our democracy is stronger when we all vote. We plan to leverage the voices of our more than 16,000 members to educate, engage, and mobilize voters and stakeholders in our communities. We will help ensure everyone is registered to vote. Our voice, our vote, our power matter now more than ever, but we can only leverage it when we all vote. I am now excited to turn this over to our former First Lady, Michelle Obama, for a few remarks.
Hello, Links Incorporated. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for all that you're doing to help everyone in this country make their voices heard in this year's election and in every election. Your work has never been more important. From the ongoing pandemic to the passion and protests we've seen for racial and social justice, it's clear that we're in the middle of a big moment in this country. And that means we need leadership that honestly reflects who we are and what we stand for. Our job between now and November is to make sure everyone we know understands that the power to make change rests on our ability to cast a vote. Fair and safe voting is going to be more important than ever this year. And that's why When We All Vote is fighting to expand vote by mail, in-person early voting, and online voter registration. Now, I'm going to be honest. We're really going to need your help to make these efforts a success. Luckily, the first step is an easy one. Just spread the word. Make sure your friends, families, and communities are registered, know their rights, and are fully prepared to vote by mail this year or vote early in person. I know many of you have entered the voter registration challenge and have been training your very own voting squads. And we're going to need you to keep that momentum going. So go to whenweallvote.org to find out more and get yourselves, your families, and your friends ready to make their voices heard. Let's get more folks across the country trained with the tools, the resources, and the information they'll need to vote, because this election couldn't be more important. Thanks again, everybody, for all that you do, and keep up the great work.
Black women are many things: strong, resilient, pragmatic, aspirational, strategic, powerful.
And we are most powerful when we exercise our right to vote.
For too long, society has expected us to settle for less than we deserve, to simply ignore the glaring issues plaguing our communities.
Issues such as police violence, sexual assault, mass incarceration, educational inequality, inadequate housing, lack of access to quality, affordable health care.
Our participation in the 2020 election is critical. The global pandemic of COVID-19 has raised the stakes for the Black community.
When we all vote, we are literally voting for our lives.
In 2018, 55% of eligible Black women voters cast votes. That's a full 6% above the average for national voter turnout. That is power.
That is power.
That is power.
In 2020, with 16 million eligible Black women voters, we can once again flex our political power.
The Links Incorporated is committed to mobilizing voters throughout this country through the Our Voice, Our Vote, Our Power initiative.
No more sitting on the sidelines and no more excuses.
For Sojourner, for Harriet, for Fannie, for Barbara, for Shirley, for Margaret, for Sarah, for generations yet unborn. From the White House to Congress to key races across every state and every city.
We will let our voice be heard. We will let our voices be heard.
Our voice,
our vote,
our power.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us now welcome to the virtual stage for an intimate conversation, Valerie B. Jarrett, Senior Advisor of the Obama Foundation and Board Chair of When We All Vote, and National President, Dr. Kimberly Jeffries Leonard.
Hello again, and this is someone who needs no introduction, so I am not going to take the time to introduce who we all know, the great Valerie Jarrett. Every time I'm in your presence, Valerie, I'm just in awe. So thank you so much for joining us today to talk about some of these very critical issues.
I am delighted to be here. Looking around, I see so many friends who I've known for years, and there's no place I'd rather be than in your good company. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, I know you're very busy because I know there's lots of work that you have to be doing with When We All Vote. So we are not going to hold up. I know everyone wants to hear what you have to say. So let's jump right in and talk a little bit about When We All Vote. We are 40 days away from this election. And as a member, as the chairman of the board of When We All Vote, what would you say are the 3 to 4 most important actions that we can take in the next 41 days?
Well, I'm so glad you asked me that question. I think you all know that this organization was launched by former First Lady Michelle Obama a couple of years ago. She has a whole group of co-chairs, and she asked me to chair the board. And it grew out of our frustration in the last presidential election when we learned that 100 million people did not vote. And so our mission is, in a nonpartisan way, to close both the age and the race gap. We know disproportionately young people don't vote, and we know disproportionately people of color's vote has been suppressed and repressed. And so we're going after those two cohorts, if you will, to try to build an educated electorate so that people recognize that a fundamental responsibility of citizenship is to vote. It's hard to complain when we don't vote. And so let's get everybody busy. So the answer to your question is simply find out today if you're registered to vote. Yesterday was National Voter Registration Day. We had a big push with Mrs. Obama to get people educated about how you have to register. Even if you think you're registered, you've got to check and verify your registration. All over the country, we are finding that the voter rolls are being purged. And so just because you voted in the last election doesn't mean you're still on the roll. So check and confirm you're registered. Then make a plan. I think everybody needs to have a plan for how they're going to vote. And so once you've gotten your own house in order and you know you're registered and you know the plan, then we got to get organized to get everybody else to do just the same. And let's face it, in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, it's going to be a lot more challenging. I mean, I'm here in Chicago with my mom, who's 92, and she's telling me she's worried about absentee ballots because we've been hearing all of the problems with the Postal Service. And so she now wants to go vote. Well, that's more than a notion, right? I don't know that I want her. But I want her to be safe. And so where we compromise, as we always have to do, right, is we'll do early vote. She'll go early, not the first day, but maybe the second day, first thing in the morning, wear her mask, social distance, make sure she washes her hands. But everybody needs that plan. And so I think we've got to get out into the community and encourage everybody to make a plan to vote in a way that they feel will be safe. And we also have to start calling out nonsense when we hear there's a lot of vote fraud from voting by mail. We've been voting by mail since the Civil War, when the military started voting by mail. It should be safe, and it should have integrity, but we also need to put pressure on the Postal Service to make sure that they're ready to accommodate that influx in absentee ballots. So those are my suggestions right off the bat. And the reason why I wanted to come here with all of you is that you have a network. You know how to push a button and reach everybody in your network, and encouraging them to do just what I've asked you to do, and ask each of them to go find 3 people and do the same thing. And I do believe, I was listening on your earlier conversation, Black women can determine the outcome of this election. That's what happened in Alabama when Doug Jones was running. They finally started looking at the numbers and discovered that it was actually Black women who showed up in record numbers. And that is how we hold our elected officials accountable, is that we are a sufficiently large voting bloc that they cannot ignore us and cannot ignore our priorities.
Valerie, the Links Incorporated, we are all in. We have our voting squads, we have our marching orders, and we have our direction from you. We know what we are going to do. But we all have these friends, children, family members who say, one vote doesn't matter, my vote won't count, my candidate didn't get there, so I'm not voting. What do we say to them? What do we say to these people who think that their vote won't make a difference, especially now?
Yeah, I hear that a lot. One vote here, one vote there. Pretty soon they add up. I mean, part of what you say is that in the last presidential election, Hillary Clinton lost by about 77,000 votes in 3 states. And I will say this to you, that I'm not being partisan, these are just the facts, that more Black people in Milwaukee did not vote than the number of votes that President Trump received in the state of Wisconsin. More Black people in Miami did not vote than the number of votes he won Florida by. So when we sit home, there are consequences of our actions. And I think part of what I say, particularly to Black people, is come on now. This is the year that John Lewis died, where he devoted his entire life to social justice, to fighting for voting rights, put himself in harm's way over that Edmund Pettus Bridge, trying to ensure that Black people have the right to vote. It means something to have that right, and it is a responsibility of citizenship. And we have a lot to lose. You look at this COVID-19, who's dying? We're dying. Black people are dying at twice the numbers of white people. And it isn't just, I'm not arguing about any one office or any one candidate. Government affects our lives at every single level. So one of the basic tenets of When We All Vote, as you all know, is that we want you to vote for your mayor, your city council, your school board if it's elected, the local prosecutors who are making decisions about who to bring charges against, the governor who's allocating resources to keep us all safe. I mean, all these offices are important. And part of what we want to say to people is, look, your candidate may not have won, but whoever's on the ballot, that's the choice you have. You don't always get to have your perfect candidate if you voted for somebody else, but choose between the two choices that you have. And I think, look, we've seen consequences of elections that don't necessarily go the right way. And if you want to live with those consequences, then you can opt out. But if you want to influence the people who are representing us, spending our money, I worked hard for my money that I turn over in taxes. I want it to be spent by somebody who shares my values and my priorities. And so I think part of what we're trying to do, particularly with the young people, because they're the ones that are often saying, well, one vote doesn't matter, is that, yes, it does. And meet them where they are and say to them, well, what issues do you care about? Do you care about the environment and climate change? Do you care about social justice, police reform? Do you care about being able to be a small business? Do you care about healthcare? What are the issues that you care about? And then go do your homework to figure out, well, which candidates who are actually on the ballot most closely reflect your priorities. May not be 100%. What partner do we have that reflects our values 100%, right? So be pragmatic, be strategic, and get off your duff and go vote.
I think that's really important. My grandmother recently passed at 109, and when she was born, it always strikes me the fact that when she was born, she didn't have the right to vote. And she left this earth with the right to vote, and she exercised that right to vote in every single election because it was so hard fought. And we've lost so many of our leaders. It feels like this year. And so really it is up to us to honor their legacy, to ensure that we exercise the right. But it seems like the further we get away from those tumultuous days, even though we're in a season of racial injustice, it seems that so many people take for granted this right that we have to vote and don't really realize that it could go anytime. Is there anything that we need to say to them? You said a lot while we've been talking, but is there anything that we could say around this legacy that we need to uphold as it relates to voting?
Well, yes, so people sacrifice greatly for us to have this right, and it should make them angry that all around our country, there are people who are trying to suppress us. All around our country, there are examples of influence from people who are mischievous, some coming from outside of our shores who are trying to influence the outcome of our election. That should make them angry. That should motivate them. I remember going down to Florida in 2012 during early vote, because we know Florida is an important state, and seeing people standing in line, going around the block in a hot fall day. And I was there to encourage them to stay in line. And I had so many elderly people say to me, girl, I'm not going anywhere. And I have my folding chair, I have my bucket of chicken. I'm gonna sit right here because I am not gonna let somebody take away that right that I know my forefathers fought so hard for me to have. And I think part of what we have to instill in young people is that sense of outrage that there are people out there trying to deny them this right. The reason they're trying to deny them the right is because they're invested in the status